So, you follow the rules, you do the rituals, say the prayers, and observe the holy days. From the outside, you are the picture of devotion. You're doing everything you're supposed to do, everything you were taught to do. But when the noise of the day fades, when the world finally goes quiet and you're alone with your thoughts, you feel it. A kind of spiritual void, an emptiness that all the rituals in the world can't seem to fill. A quiet, nagging question echoes in the chambers of your heart. Is this really all there is? If you've ever felt that, if that question resonates deep within you, you should know it isn't a sign of weak faith. It's not a failure on your part. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a sign that your soul is aching for something deeper, something more real. It is a sacred call from the very core of your being to move beyond just doing your duty and into a real, personal, living experience with the divine. This is the story of how the ancient Sufi path of inner purification can take your faith from a simple obligation, a checklist of duties, and turn it into something truly, breathtakingly extraordinary. For so many of us, faith begins as a framework for life. It's a set of instructions, a cultural inheritance handed down by our family and community. It's a world of shoulds and musts. You must pray 5 times a day. You must fast during Ramadan. You must give to the poor. And these are good, powerful, necessary things. They are the pillars that give our lives order, discipline, and a sense of communal belonging. They are the bedrock. But it's entirely possible to do all of that, to follow every rule to the letter, and still feel like you're living in an empty house. The motions, once filled with intention, become mechanical. The prayers feel less like an intimate conversation with the beloved and more like reciting a script you've memorized but no longer feel. The beautiful words pass over your tongue, but they don't seem to descend into your heart. Fasting can become a mere test of physical endurance, a daily battle against hunger and thirst, instead of a profound purification of the soul. Charity can become a transaction, a way to ease our conscience, rather than a true overflowing of compassion. Faith, in this state, can shrink into a checklist, and every day you diligently tick the boxes, hoping that by some spiritual arithmetic, all those actions will eventually add up to a feeling of peace or connection. But that connection feels perpetually out of reach. The peace, when it comes, is fleeting. You might scroll through social media and see others who seem so full of spiritual joy, their faces radiant, their posts overflowing with contentment, and you wonder, what's their secret? What have they unlocked that I haven't? You might even feel a sharp pang of guilt about your own spiritual dryness, thinking you're somehow flawed or ungrateful. You might think, I have so much to be thankful for. Why do I still feel this hollowness inside? Let me be absolutely clear. You are not failing. This feeling is a fundamental, and even necessary, stage of the spiritual journey. The problem isn't the rituals themselves. The rituals are the doorway. The problem is when we spend our whole lives standing at the doorway, polishing it, admiring its architecture, and even arguing about its design, but never actually turning the handle and stepping inside. The ordinary experience of faith often focuses on the outward form, the body of religion, while the inner meaning, its soul, gets neglected. Sufism teaches that this very feeling of emptiness is the first sign of grace. It's your soul, tired of standing outside in the cold, knocking on the door from within, begging to be let into the heart of it all. When that ache for something more becomes too loud to ignore, when the hollowness becomes a constant companion, we begin to search for answers. We read, we listen, we ask. And this is often where we encounter the path of spirituality, which most people in the West know as Sufism. Now, let's be very clear about what Sufism is and what it isn't. It's not a different religion or some kind of breakaway sect. It is not, as some mistakenly assume, an import from other traditions or a syncretic blend of philosophies. Sufism is, and has always been, described by its greatest masters as the heart of Islam. It is the inner, esoteric, mystical dimension of the faith. It is the science of purifying the self to transform the soul. If the laws and rituals of the Islamic law are the body of the religion, Sufism is its beating heart, pumping life, meaning, and divine light into every single limb. The body cannot survive without the heart, and the heart has no function without the body. They are inseparable. The great scholars of this tradition framed this journey using a powerful, pivotal story from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, known as the Hadith of Gabriel. In this story, the angel Gabriel appeared to the Prophet and his companions in the form of a man. But this was no ordinary man. He was described as wearing intensely white clothes, with intensely black hair, showing no signs of a long journey. Yet he was a stranger whom no one recognized. He came and sat before the Prophet, knee to knee, and placed his hands on his thighs in a posture of perfect respect, and asked him to define the religion. First, he defined Islam. This is the outward submission, the body of the faith. It's performing the 5 pillars of a declaration of faith, praying, fasting, giving charity, and making the pilgrimage to Mecca. This is the world of ordinary, obligatory faith that we've been talking about, the essential, non-negotiable foundation of our practice. Second, Gabriel asked about belief. The Prophet defined this as inward belief, the mind of the faith. It's having solid, unshakable faith in God, His angels, His revealed books, His messengers, the last day, and in divine destiny, both its good and its seeming ill. This is the bedrock of our conviction, the intellectual and heartfelt certainty that what we are doing is true and for a purpose. But then, Gabriel asked about a third, deeper level. He asked, "What is excellence?" And the Prophet delivered a definition that would become the cornerstone of the entire Sufi tradition. He replied, "Excellence is to worship God as if you see Him, for if you do not see Him, He surely sees you." Excellence, this is the goal. The word itself means spiritual excellence, to make something beautiful, to perfect Italiano. It is the quality that gives life to our actions and beliefs. It's the quantum leap from a faith based on rules you follow and beliefs you hold, to a state of constant, loving, moment-by-moment awareness of the divine presence. Sufism, simply put, is the time-tested, systematic path to achieving excellence. It is the methodology, the spiritual technology that takes you from Islam doing the right things in belief, believing the right things, to excellence, being in a state of beautiful, unending connection with the one who is the source of all things. This is the call to a deeper path. It's the realization that faith isn't just a contract you fulfill out of duty, but a love affair you experience with your entire being. That spiritual void you've been feeling, that's the space carved out in your heart, just waiting to be filled with the living presence of excellence. The first step on this path isn't outward, it's inward. It is a courageous journey into the complicated, often contradictory, and sometimes messy landscape of your own self. And right there at the very start of this inner territory, you meet the primary obstacle, the great antagonist of your spiritual story. What the Sufis call the self. The self is often translated as the ego or the lower self, but it's more complex than that. It's the part of us driven by raw desires, base instincts, and a cavernous sense of self-importance. The self is the wellspring from which our arrogance, envy, greed, anger, and lust flow. It's that incessant, whining voice inside that whispers, "Me first, my needs, my wants, my reputation." It is the force that weaves the grand illusion that we are the center of the universe, fundamentally separate from everyone and everything, and most tragically, separate from God. The self is like a dense, heavy veil that stands between our consciousness and the light of the divine. In the orderly state of faith, we can perform all our duties perfectly, but the self is still sitting on the throne, running the show from behind the scenes. We pray, but our mind is consumed with our own status, our worries, and our plans. We give to charity, but the self secretly desires recognition and praise for our generosity. The outward actions might be correct, but the heart is so clouded by the fog of the ego that it cannot receive or reflect any divine light. So, the very first, and arguably most difficult, job on the Sufi path is purification. On the self, this isn't about destroying the self or engaging in self. It is about taming it. Think of it like breaking a wild horse. You don't eliminate the horse's immense power and vitality. You discipline it, you harness its energy, and you point it in the right direction. The Sufi masters teach that the self has multiple stages of development. It begins as the commanding self, its most primitive state, which is dominated by worldly cravings and pushes us relentlessly toward bad habits and heat. But with spiritual discipline and unflinching self-awareness, it can be trained to become the reproachful self. This is the awakening of the conscience, the stage where you feel guilt for your shortcomings and possess a sincere desire to do better. From there, with immense struggle, it can ascend through further stages like the inspired self, until it eventually reaches the state of the self at peace, a soul that has found complete serenity and harmony with the divine will. This cleanup work is absolutely essential. You cannot build a palace on a foundation of mud and thorns. You have to clear the ground first, pull out the deep-rooted weeds of pride, envy, and selfishness, and prepare the soil of your heart for what is to come. So how do you actually begin this monumental task of taming the ego and purifying the heart? The Sufi tradition provides us with a powerful set of tools, honed and perfected over 14 centuries. The single most important of these tools is remembrance of God. Remembrance of God literally means remembrance. In practice, it is the constant act of remembering God. On the surface, this might look like the audible, rhythmic repetition of the names of God, or of sacred phrases like, "There is no God but God." But remembrance of God is so much more than just chanting. It is the high art of polishing the mirror of the heart. The great poet and mystic Rumi used a beautiful analogy for this. He said the heart is created to be a perfect mirror, designed to reflect the light of divine secrets and realities. But over time, through our engagement with the world, our worries, our attachments, our sins, and the endless demands of our ego, this mirror becomes covered with thick layers of dust and rust. We can no longer see the reflection clearly. The heart becomes dark and opaque. The practice of remembrance of God is the slow, steady, patient, and loving act of polishing that mirror. As Rumi asks, if a body of metal can be polished to a mirror-like finish, what polishing might the mirror of the heart require? When you engage in remembrance of God, you are fundamentally shifting your focus. Your mind, which is normally a chaotic marketplace of worldly concerns. What's for dinner? What that person said about you, anxieties about the future, regrets about the past is given one single, sacred point of concentration. You are consciously and deliberately replacing the noise of the self with the name of God. With every repetition, a little bit of the dust of heedlessness gets wiped away. With every moment of remembrance, the rust of forgetting is scrubbed off. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the mirror starts to clear. This practice literally rewires your consciousness. The scattered, anxious, and self-obsessed patterns of your mind begin to give way to a focused, calm, and expansive awareness of the divine. It is a way of retuning your entire soul, moving it from the frequency of the ego to the frequency of God. This isn't a passive exercise. It requires profound discipline. The Sufis say you begin doing remembrance of God with your tongue, which is the easiest part. Then, with persistence, you learn to do it silently with your heart, until the remembrance becomes as natural as your own heartbeat. Finally, your whole soul joins in, until every cell in your being is vibrating with this remembrance. It's through this tireless, dedicated polishing that the ego's suffocating grip begins to loosen, and the heart, now becoming clear and bright, is made ready for the next and most glorious stage of the journey, the path of love. If discipline and remembrance are the engine of this journey, then love is its high-octane fuel. The Sufi path is, above all else, the path of love. And this isn't the sentimental, fleeting emotion we often call love in our daily lives. In the Sufi lexicon, is a cosmic force. It is an all-consuming fire that, once ignited, burns away everything that is not the beloved. This is where the most radical transformation occurs. Your entire relationship with God is completely It moves from the model of a fearful servant and a distant, stern master, and into the incandescent realm of the lover and the beloved. God is no longer just a concept to be understood, a lawgiver to be obeyed, or a judge to be feared, but the ultimate object of your heart's most passionate and desperate longing. Sufi poetry is drenched in the language of this divine romance. The soul is depicted as the heartbroken lover, separated from its original home with the beloved, wandering the world in a state of exile, searching constantly for reunion. In tea state, every beautiful sunset, every act of kindness, even the profound love you feel for another human being, it's all seen as a faint echo, a form of metaphorical love that exists only to point you toward the one true, divine love. On this path of love, we encounter one of the most profound and misunderstood concepts in Sufism: annihilation or effacement. Now, that sounds terrifying, doesn't it? It sounds like utter destruction, but in the language of a lover, it's the ultimate goal. Annihilation is the experience of the lover dissolving into the beloved, like a single drop of water finally returning to the vast, limitless ocean. It is the annihilation of the false, separate self, the ego, the self-in, the overwhelming, all-encompassing presence of the one you love. The fire of love of divine burns away all the ego's remaining impurities, the last vestiges of pride, the deep-seated fears, the subtle selfishness. It consumes the central illusion that you were ever separate to begin with. And when the lover is completely lost in love, what is left? Only the beloved. This dying before you die isn't a physical death. It's the death of the ego's tyranny over you. It's the moment the mirror becomes so perfectly polished, so impossibly clear, that it no longer reflects its own image at all. It only, and perfectly, reflects the face of God. This is the peak of the extraordinary experience. The spiritual void isn't just filled, it's completely obliterated by the sheer fullness of the divine presence. And that old, nagging question, is this all there is finally and forever answered with the silent, joyful, all-knowing certainty that there is, and only ever has been, the one. So what happens after this fire of love and the climactic experience of annihilation? Do you just float away in a state of detached bliss, disconnected from the very world you tried so hard to transcend? This is a common and profound misunderstanding. The Sufi path doesn't end in escape. It ends in a glorious transformation. The final stage is known as subsistence, or abiding in God. After the drop merges with the ocean, it doesn't just disappear. In a way, it becomes the ocean. After the mirror vanishes into the divine reflection, it doesn't shatter. It continues to exist, but now as a perfect, selfless channel for the light. Subsistence is the return to the world, but as a completely new person. Your ego, your false self, has been dissolved, and what's left is a soul that now acts as a willing and joyful instrument for God's attributes in the world. This is where the journey comes full circle, back to the beginning, but on an entirely different plane of existence. The person in a state of subsistence lives a normal life on the outside. They go to work, they talk to people, they have families, they face challenges and responsibilities. But inwardly, everything has changed. Their actions are no longer driven by the selfish whining and desperate needs of the self. They are now moved by a deep, constant, and abiding love and a sense of unity with all of creation. Their hands become God's hands to give. Their words become God's words to comfort and heal. Their very presence becomes a source of tranquility and peace for everyone around them. The true sign of a transformed heart isn't performing supernatural miracles. It's the consistent embodiment of divine qualities like compassion, generosity, patience, and humility in the midst of everyday life. When faced with difficulty, they see the divine wisdom within it. When faced with animosity from others, they respond with grace and forgiveness, seeing not a monster but a soul in pain. Someone who has made this journey still performs the rituals, but they are no longer empty. Prayer is now an intimate conversation with the beloved. Fasting is a joyful polishing of the soul's mirror. Charity is the natural, spontaneous overflow of a heart that is bursting with divine love. The whole structure of religion, which maybe once felt like a restrictive cage, is now seen for what it truly is. The beautiful and necessary trellis that allows the rose of the spirit to grow and blossom toward the sun. They live fully in the world, but they are no longer owned by it. They have found the extraordinary right in the middle of the ordinary. We started with a question that came from a place of deep emptiness. Is this all there is? We were standing in the world of ordinary faith, meticulously following the rules, but feeling a profound spiritual void. We've just walked through the story of a path that promises to fill that void, not with more rules or more obligations, but with living, breathing, transformative love. We've seen that this journey is a journey inward. It starts with the courage to face and purify the ego, the self that keeps us feeling small, afraid, and separate. We learned about the master tool of remembrance of God, the act of remembrance that polishes the heart's mirror until it can reflect the boundless divine light. We walked the path of love of divine, the consuming fire of love that dissolves the false self in the state of annihilation or annihilation. And finally, we saw how this journey doesn't end in a mystical escape, but in subsistence, a return to the world as a transformed human being, a source of peace and compassion for all. The journey from ordinary to extraordinary is not a journey to some faraway land. It's a journey into the very center of your own heart. It's the path from knowing about God to truly, intimately knowing God. And the profound beauty of it is that this path isn't just for famous saints from centuries past. Their stories are not just history, they're roadmaps. They are proof of the astonishing potential that is sleeping in every single one of our hearts, just waiting to be woken up. That feeling of emptiness that you may have felt is not a curse. It is a sacred invitation. It's the first whisper from the beloved, calling you to come closer, to step beyond the dry routine and into the breathtaking, living reality of the divine presence. The path is there. The door is open. The journey is waiting. If this story spoke to you, if you feel that call in your own soul and want to explore this path more deeply, please subscribe and click the notification bell. In the coming weeks, we'll be going deeper into these ideas, looking at the practical steps, exploring the lives of the great mystics, and sharing more of their timeless wisdom. And please, share your own experience in the comments below. Have you ever felt that spiritual void? That longing for something more? Your story matters, and it can be a source of comfort for others on the same path. Thank you for walking with us today.